Welcome back everyone to another story. We really hope you enjoy this one. It's a brand new single-part story with a bit of a different premise. Please enjoy the story. My name is Ethan, and up until about a month ago, I was your fairly average 22-year-old guy. I had just finished up my degree in graphic design. I was living in a small apartment above a bakery in the city, and I was slowly figuring out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I didn't have a serious girlfriend, I didn't have a big group of friends, and honestly, most days I just spent designing random things on my laptop and eating takeout. It wasn't a bad life, it was just a pretty quiet one. Everything I'm about to tell you started the day. I got the phone call about my grandmother. My grandmother Eleanor had passed away peacefully in her sleep. At the age of 89, I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years since I had been so busy with university, and she lived a fair distance away out in the countryside. I felt awful when I got the news. I had always been close to her when I was younger. She used to tell me these long, strange stories about her youth stories that sounded more like fairy tales than real memories. My mom always said Grandma had a wild imagination, but I loved listening to her anyway. A week after the funeral, I got another phone call this time from my grandmother's lawyer. He told me that Eleanor had left me something in her will and that I would need to come out to her old house to collect it. He wouldn't tell me what it was, just that it was important, and that Grandma had been very specific about wanting me to have it. So the next weekend I drove the 3 hours out to her little cottage in the countryside. The place looked exactly like I remembered it. A small white house with a garden that had mostly grown over now a wooden porch, and those 2 rocking chairs she used to sit in during the summer. The lawyer met me at the front door. He was an older man in a brown suit, and he introduced himself as Mr. Halstead. "Hello, Ethan. Thank you for coming out all this way," said Mr. Halstead. "No problem. Thanks for reaching out," I said back to him. He led me into the living room, which still smelled faintly of the lavender potpourri. Grandma used to keep everywhere on the coffee table sat a small wooden box, maybe the size of a paperback book. Eleanor was very specific about what she wanted you to have. "She told me not to open this box, that only you were meant to see what was inside," said Mr. Halstead, handing the box over to me. I took it, and it felt heavier than it looked. I asked him if there was anything else, and he shook his head. "No. She only left this one item to you. The house and the rest of her belongings are going to your mother and your aunt, but this was just for you," he said after a bit more chatting. Mr. Halstead left, and I was alone in my grandmother's living room with this mysterious little box. I sat down on her old couch and slowly opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of dark purple velvet, was a silver locket. It was oval-shaped, and it had these strange, swirling patterns etched into the front. It wasn't a design I recognized. It wasn't quite floral, and it wasn't quite abstract. It looked almost like flowing water frozen in metal. There was also a small folded piece of paper tucked into the corner of the box. I unfolded it and immediately recognized my grandmother's handwriting, even though her hands must have been shaky when she wrote it. "My dear Ethan," the note began, "if you are reading this, then I have passed on. I want you to have this locket. It has been in our family for a very long time, longer than you would believe. I never gave it to your mother or your aunt because it wasn't meant for them, it was meant for you. Please do not open the locket unless you are truly ready to see what it has to show you. And whatever happens, please know that everything will be okay. In the end, I love you all. My love, Grandma." I read the note about 4 times. I had no idea what she meant. Everything will be okay in the end. Okay. In the end. Of what I looked down at the locket sitting in its velvet bed, and honestly I felt a little chill run through me. It was such a strange gift, and an even stranger note. I decided not to open it right there. I put the locket around my neck, since it had a delicate silver chain attached, and I tucked it under my shirt. I closed up the box, put the note in my pocket, said a quiet goodbye to my grandmother's house, and drove home the whole 3-hour drive back. I kept thinking about the locket and the note. What did she mean? Don't open it unless I was ready. What was inside a photo? An inscription, some kind of secret family message. It made no sense back at my apartment. I put the wooden box on my shelf, but I kept wearing the locket under my shirt. Something about it felt comforting, almost warm, even though it was just cool silver against my skin. 2 days went by and I didn't open it. I was too nervous. Something about the tone of Grandma's note made me feel like whatever was inside wasn't just a normal photo. But on the 3rd night, I was sitting on my couch watching some show I wasn't really paying attention to, and I found myself pulling the locket out from under my shirt and just staring at it. I finally decided that I was being ridiculous. It was probably just a picture, and Grandma was just being dramatic, like she always was in her stories. I clicked the small clasp on the side of the locket, and it popped open. At first I thought it was empty. There was no photo, no inscription, no piece of paper, just 2 small mirrored surfaces inside both halves of the locket. And then I made the mistake of looking directly directly into the mirror on the left side. The room around me got very quiet. The sound of the show on my TV faded away, and I felt this weird pulling sensation, like something was tugging at the very center of my chest. The mirror I was looking into started to glow with a soft blue light, and I couldn't look away. No matter how much I tried, the glow got brighter and brighter until it filled my whole vision, and then everything went black. I don't know how long I was out for. When I woke up, I was lying on my couch in the exact same position I had been. The locket was still open on my chest, but the mirrors weren't glowing anymore. My TV was still playing the same show, and when I looked at the clock, only about 10 minutes had passed. I sat up and immediately I knew something was wrong. My body felt different. It felt lighter, smaller somehow. I looked down at my hands and I nearly screamed. My hands were smaller than they should be. My fingers were thinner and longer, and my nails, which had been kind of stubby and unkempt as a guy, were now smooth and slightly curved. I jumped up off the couch and ran to the bathroom, and honestly, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw in the mirror. Staring back at me was a girl. She looked maybe 21 or 22, with long dark brown hair that fell down past her shoulders in soft waves. Her eyes were the same green as mine, but bigger and framed with long dark lashes. Her face was heart-shaped with a small pointed chin, high cheekbones, and full pink lips. Her nose was small and slightly turned up at the tip. She was pretty in a way that was hard to describe. She wasn't glamorous or model beautiful. She just looked like a really pretty normal girl, the kind of girl you might see at a coffee shop and think, oh, she's cute. I stood there just staring for what must have been 5 whole minutes. I brought my hand up to my face and touched my cheek. The girl in the mirror did the same. I opened my mouth, she did too. Then I made a small sound and my breath caught in my throat because the voice that came out was soft and higher pitched. What is happening to me? I said out loud, and my new voice filled the bathroom. It was a nice voice, actually, gentle and clear, but it was definitely not my voice. I looked down at the rest of my body, my chest, which had been flat and pretty average. As a guy was now curved, my clothes, which had been baggy on my old body, were now hanging strangely, because everything about my proportions had changed. My shoulders were narrower, my waist was much smaller, and when I turned to the side, I could see my hips had widened out. I lifted up my shirt just to check, and yeah, there was no doubt about it. I had breasts. They weren't huge, but they were definitely there, sitting on my chest like they had always belonged. I let my shirt drop back down and just kind of leaned against the sink, trying to process everything. The locket was still hanging around my neck, and I noticed something else. The swirling water patterns on the front had shifted. They weren't in the same positions they had been before. It was like the metal had moved on its own. I finally forced myself to walk back out into the living room. I grabbed the note Grandma had left me and read it again. Everything will be okay. In the end, had she known, this is what the locket did. But why would she leave me something like this without any warning? I sat down on the couch, and I have to admit I started crying. It wasn't dramatic sobbing, it was just quiet tears rolling down my face because I had no idea what to do. I wasn't Ethan anymore, or at least Ethan didn't look like Ethan. I was some pretty girl I had never seen before. Wearing Ethan's now 2 baggy clothes in Ethan's apartment, I cried for a while, and then I did something that probably should have been my first thought. I tried to close the locket. Maybe closing it would reverse everything. I clicked it shut and I waited. Nothing happened. I opened it again and looked into the mirrors. Nothing happened. I tried holding it and thinking really hard about being a guy again. Nothing. Eventually I gave up, and I just sat on the couch, and eventually I fell asleep from the emotional exhaustion of it all. When I woke up, it was morning, and I was still a girl for a full minute. I lay there, hoping it had all been a really vivid dream, but the second I sat up and felt my hair fall around my shoulders and felt the weight on my chest, I knew it was real. Okay, I said out loud to myself, I need to figure this out. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to think. Practically, I couldn't leave the apartment as a girl wearing men's clothes. I would look ridiculous. And I still needed to eat and get groceries and function. I remembered that my grandmother had also loved shopping, and she had actually left a few boxes of her things in the attic of her cottage, but there was no way I was going to drive out there again, looking like this. I did some Googling on my laptop, which by the way was a really weird experience trying to type with these new, smaller hands, and I ordered a bunch of clothes online for same-day delivery. I picked things that seemed simple: a couple of t-shirts, a pair of jeans, some leggings, a hoodie, and some underwear. I basically had to guess my sizes based on comparing my new body to what I remembered women's clothing sizes were. I also ordered a pack of sports bras because I figured those would be the easiest to figure out. I spent the next few hours just sitting in my apartment in my old baggy clothes, waiting for the delivery. I made some coffee, and I actually caught myself in the reflection of my microwave door, and I did a double take because I forgot for a second what I looked like. Now the delivery came around noon, and I brought the packages inside. I went into my bedroom and started trying things on. This was probably one of the strangest experiences of my life. I had never worn women's clothing before. I had never worn a bra before. It took me a solid 10 minutes to figure out how to put a sports bra on. I ended up watching a YouTube tutorial for it. Eventually I got the hang of it, and I put on a pair of jeans and a simple black t-shirt. When I looked at myself in the mirror this time, it was actually kind of shocking. I looked normal. I looked like just a girl, not a guy who had been turned into a girl. Not some weird half-in-between thing. I looked like a real, actual girl who could walk down the street and no one would give her a second glance. Well, no one except maybe the guys who thought she was cute. I sat down on my bed and I tried to think, what do I do now? I couldn't tell my mom, she would freak out. I couldn't tell any of my friends because honestly I didn't have any close friends to tell. I couldn't just show up at work as a different person, and I certainly couldn't reverse it because I had already tried. I picked up the locket and I read Grandma's note for what felt like the 100th time, everything will be okay. In the end, that was the only thing I had to hold on to. I decided that, until I figured out how to reverse this, I would have to just live as this girl. I would need a name. I would need to figure out how to walk and talk and act like a girl. And I would need to be careful about who I interacted with. I sat on my bed and I thought about names for a while. I felt like it needed to be something that felt right. Something my grandma would have liked. Eventually I settled on Elena. It was similar to my grandmother's name Eleanor, and it felt like a soft, nice name that suited the face I was now wearing over the next few days. I basically stayed in my apartment. I ordered more clothes. I ordered basic makeup, even though I had no idea how to use it, and I watched a lot of tutorial videos on YouTube. I learned how to walk with a slightly different posture because my center of gravity was different now. I learned how to sit with my legs closed, which felt so unnatural at first. I learned how to put my hair up in a ponytail and how to French braid it, although the braiding took me like 50 tries to get right. I even practiced my new voice, not to change it, but just to get used to how it sounded coming out of my mouth. After about a week of hiding in my apartment, I finally decided I needed to leave the house. I couldn't stay locked up forever. I needed to go get groceries. At the very least, I put on a pair of jeans, a soft pink sweater, and some white sneakers. I brushed my hair and left it down. I even put on a little bit of the lip gloss I had ordered. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a totally normal, cute girl looking back at me. I took a deep breath, grabbed my keys, and left the apartment, walking out into the world. As a girl for the first time was surreal. The bakery downstairs, the one I lived above the guy who worked there, Marco knew me as Ethan. He had seen me almost every day for the past year. I walked past the front window, and Marco was standing behind the counter. He looked up and saw me, and I froze for a second thinking he would recognize me somehow, but he just smiled and gave me a little wave. The kind of polite, friendly wave you give a pretty girl who's walking past your shop. I gave him a small wave back and kept walking, and my heart was pounding because he had no idea it was me at the grocery store. I got a few weird moments where I forgot I was different, for example, when I went to grab a heavy bag of rice off a top shelf, and I realized I couldn't quite reach it anymore because I was shorter now. A guy walking past saw me struggling and said, "Hey, do you want me to grab that for you?" My first instinct was to say, "No, bro, I got it," but I stopped myself just in time, and instead I smiled a little bit and said, "Oh yes, please, if you don't mind, that would be so helpful," and my voice came out sounding just a little bit shy. The guy grabbed the bag, handed it to me, and I said, "Thank you so much," and he said, "No problem, have a good one," and he walked away, and I just stood there for a second because that was the first real interaction I had ever had as a girl with a stranger, and it had gone completely normally. I paid for my groceries and walked back to my apartment, and honestly I felt like I was floating a little bit. I felt something I hadn't expected to feel, a little bit of excitement. Over the next couple of weeks, I slowly started building a life as Elena. I set up a fake social media account, and I made a new email address. I told my mom over text that I was really busy with a big freelance project and that I wouldn't be able to visit or call for a while. She believed it. Because I had done that before, I ordered more clothes. I got better at makeup. After a lot of practice, I even bought a curling iron and figured out how to give my hair those nice loose waves. I signed up for a small yoga class because I read that it would help me get used to my new body's flexibility and balance. The first class was terrifying. I walked in, expecting everyone to somehow know I wasn't really a girl, but nobody looked at me weirdly at all. The instructor said, "Welcome. Nice to see a new face. What's your name?" I told her Elena. She smiled and said, "Welcome. Elena, grab a mat wherever you like," and that was it. I was accepted as Elena. I made my first friend in that yoga class. Her name was Priya. She was in her mid-20s, worked at a marketing agency, and she was one of the friendliest people I had ever met after the second class. She came up to me and said, "Hey, we're going to grab smoothies. Do you want to come?" I said yes, even though I was nervous, and honestly, I ended up having a great time. Priya and two other girls from the class, Rachel and Jamie, were all really easy to talk to. They didn't ask me a lot of personal questions. They just talked about work and shows they were watching and dating, and it was actually kind of nice being included in that kind of friendly, casual conversation. I had never really had that as a guy at the smoothie place. I ordered a strawberry banana one because I didn't know what else to get, and Priya laughed and said, "That's such a starter smoothie. Next time you have to try the green one. It's life-changing." I laughed too, and I realized my laugh sounded completely different now. It was softer, higher, and it actually made Rachel look over and say, "Aw, you have such a cute laugh, Elena." I felt myself blush, which was another new thing. My old body had never really blushed the way this one did. All the blood seemed to rush right to my cheeks. The four of us sat at that little smoothie place for over an hour, and by the end of it, Priya had added me to a group chat with all their names in it and told me I was officially part of the yoga crew. Now I walked home that day, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. I felt included. The thing that surprised me the most was how quickly I started to feel comfortable in my new body. I stopped noticing my hair and my face. I stopped feeling weird when I sat down and my hips took up more space. I stopped being confused when I looked in the mirror. It started to just feel like me. The little things stopped bothering me too. I stopped being surprised when I heard my voice on a voicemail. I stopped flinching when I caught my reflection in a store window. I stopped feeling weird when I had to buy tampons for the first time, which, by the way, was a whole experience in itself. I stood in the aisle at the pharmacy for probably 20 minutes, reading every single box, until an older woman came over and said, "Honey, do you need some help?" And I was so embarrassed, but she was so kind. She walked me through what to get for a beginner. And she didn't judge me at all when I told her I had never bought them before. I told her I had just moved out on my own and my mom used to buy them for me, which wasn't exactly the truth, but wasn't exactly a lie either. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, we all had a first time," and she picked out a starter pack for me by the time I got home. I was actually proud of myself for handling it a week later. When the time actually came, I was terrified. But I had watched enough videos and read enough forum posts that I got through it, and honestly, it wasn't as bad as I had built it up to be in my head. It was just another part of this new life around the 3-week mark. I actually caught myself smiling at my reflection. While I was doing my makeup one morning, I was applying a little bit of blush, and I looked at myself and I thought, you know what? You look really pretty today, Elena. And then I realized what I had just thought, and I stopped for a second because that thought had come naturally. It hadn't been forced. I hadn't been trying to convince myself. It had just been a real, genuine thought. I put down the blush brush and I sat down on the edge of my bed, and I thought about everything for a while. I thought about how, a month ago, I had been Ethan, sitting alone in his apartment, eating takeout and designing things nobody would ever see. And now I was Elena. I had friends. I went to yoga twice a week. I had learned how to cook simple meals because I actually wanted to. Now I felt healthier because I had been walking more. I felt more social because Priya kept dragging me out to things. I felt like I had a life. I still hadn't figured out how to reverse the locket. Honestly, I hadn't tried in a couple of weeks. I picked it up off my dresser, and I looked at it. The swirling water patterns had shifted again over time. I noticed they seemed to move slightly every day, as if the metal was still alive somehow. I opened it and looked at the mirrors. Nothing happened. They didn't glow. They didn't do anything. I closed it and I put it back around my neck, where it had been. Ever since that first night, I read Grandma's note again. Everything will be okay. In the end, I finally understood what she meant. Grandma had known she had known that the locket would do this, and she had known that I would be okay, maybe more than okay, maybe better. She had probably experienced it herself, or someone in the family had, which explained all those wild stories she used to tell. She must have gone through this same thing, and she must have known that it would end up giving me the life I was too scared to build for myself, as Ethan, a life with friends, with hobbies, with real interactions, with actually caring about how I looked and how I felt, and being present in the world. I sat there on the edge of my bed holding the locket, and I did something I hadn't done since that first night. I cried again. But this time it wasn't from fear or confusion. This time it was because I finally understood what my grandmother had given me. She hadn't cursed me. She had freed me. I said thank you out loud to no one in particular, but I hoped somewhere she could hear me. A couple weeks later, I got a call from my mom. She was asking how the project was going, and when I would be able to visit. and I realized I needed to figure out my next step. I couldn't hide, as Elena forever. Eventually people would notice that Ethan wasn't around anymore. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, and I started thinking about what I actually wanted to do. I could try harder to reverse the locket. Maybe there was something in Grandma's things back at the cottage that could explain more, but even as I thought that I knew I didn't actually want to reverse it, I liked being Elena. I liked her life. I liked her body, I liked her friends, and I liked the future she was building for herself. So I made a decision I would call my mom, and I would tell her the truth, or at least a version of the truth. I would tell her that Ethan had decided to make a big change, and that from now on, I wanted to be called Elena. I would tell her that Grandma had actually been supportive of this, and had left me something to help me understand who I was. I would tell her that I was happy, and that I hoped she could accept me. My mom is a good person, and she loved Grandma more than anything, and I think if I told her that Grandma had known, then she would try to understand. A couple days later, I made the call. It was one of the hardest phone calls I have ever made, and my mom was shocked at first, but she cried, and she asked a lot of questions, and eventually she said, "Honey, if this is who you are, then I love you no matter what. And if Grandma knew, then I know she would have been proud of you." It took her a while to get used to calling me Elena and using different pronouns, but she got there. She visited my apartment about 2 weeks after that phone call, and when she saw me for the first time, she just stood in the doorway for a long moment, and then she started crying, but not sad crying. She was smiling the whole time. She said, "Oh, honey, you look so much like her. You look so much like your grandma." I hugged her and I cried a little too, and after that, things got easier. Every visit she brought over old things of Grandma's for me, some jewelry, a scarf that Grandma used to wear, a couple of dresses that were still in perfect condition, and each item made me feel more connected to her, and to who I was becoming. My aunt was more confused, but also came around eventually. I don't know what she thought happened to Ethan physically. I just told her I had been on hormones for a while, which explained the changes. She didn't push it. My old college friends were the harder part. I ended up messaging the 2 guys I used to game with online, and I just told them I was going through some big life changes and needed some space. One of them was cool about it. The other one I haven't heard from since, and honestly, that's okay. It made me realize how much of my old life had been just filling silence with people who didn't really know me anyway. It's been about 6 months now. Since that first night I opened the locket, I still wear it every day. The swirling patterns still shift and change. I've stopped worrying about that. Elena has become my whole life. I have real friends. Now Priya is basically my best friend, Rachel and Jamie, and I hang out almost every weekend. I started dating a really nice guy named Chris, who I met at a coffee shop. He thinks I've been a girl my whole life, and I'm okay with that. I can be honest with him about a lot of things, but not about that. Not yet. Maybe someday. But for now, he just knows me as Elena, the sweet, slightly quirky graphic designer who lives above a bakery. I visit my mom now on weekends sometimes, and we go through old photo albums together. The other day, she pulled out a photo of my grandmother from when Grandma was around my current age, and I gasped because Grandma looked exactly like me, not similar to me exactly, like me. Same face, same hair color, same eyes, same everything. My mom said, "Isn't that funny? You know, I always thought you and Grandma had similar features, but I didn't realize how much. Until now, I just nodded and smiled, because I knew now for sure Grandma had used the locket too. She had probably been born as someone else too, and she had left the locket to me because she knew I needed the same gift she had once been given. I still think about Ethan sometimes. I think about that lonely guy sitting in his apartment eating takeout by himself, and I don't miss him exactly, but I hope wherever he is in some other version of things he's doing. Okay for me though, I couldn't be happier with my life. I am Elena now. I always was Elena. I just didn't know it yet, and Grandma knew all along. Thank you, Grandma, for the best gift anyone has ever given me." Thanks for watching this video. More videos will be coming very soon. We would really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.